Hello, welcome to lecture 3 of module 10. In the previous module, we discussed about two fundamental methods of projecting income statement, and here we are going to discuss further different other models which are also in practice at the end of the users community so far as projection of income statement is concerned, which is going to serve varied purpose. Now, to start with, the third method of projecting income statement is bottom up method, where we are there to start in a reverse order. Normally, when you are going to talk about income statement, we are there to start from the revenue or the sales generated in the business and the estimation with regard to that. But under bottom up method, here we are going to start with a reverse orientation by considering the down the line activities at operational level which is going to be executed at the end of the business so as to facilitate the operating activities of the business. To start with, we are there to first predict all the departmental and divisional level expenses related to operation, related to manpower, related to maintenance, related to all those which are going to be incurred at the first hand so far as the activities to be executed at the end of the business is concerned. After executing all these activities and estimating the potential cost incurrence therewith all these activities, we are there to move further to the second layer of activities which are to be executed at the end of the business to further the activities. Say for example, after producing the product, we are there to take up different activities for its marketing, for its distribution, for facilitating the logistics, for facilitating the distributional dimensions of the business, and to make that particular product ready for sale at the warehouse or at the company level. To do so, we are there to again incur certain additional expenses in order to make it to the point of sales. Now, in a reverse order, we are there to accumulate all the expenses at the end of the business which is expected to be incurred in lieu of different activities, may it be production, may it be administration, may it be maintenance, may it be logistics, may it be distribution, may it be marketing, and so on and so forth. We are there to finally predict the sales activities or the quantum and magnitude of sales that is expected to be generated, and in this way the bottom up approach operates while talking about the projection of income statement. Now, in this I have just jotted down some of the elementary approaches. The bottom up approach to income statement forecast entails creating estimates at the highest level possible, usually by projecting individual components such as departmental expenses, employee based cost and product level sales, and then combining these components to create the complete income statement. So, here we are going reverse. We are first accumulating all the information pertaining to the components of cost at different functionalities, and thereafter we are going for the projection of sales revenue based on that activities, and we are clubbing both the revenue orientation and the cost orientation in order to project the income statement of the business. Moving further, when you are going to talk about bottom up method, there lies some typical advantages unlike that of the percentage of sales method or trend analysis method. Some of the advantages have been jotted down in this slide. It is more precise for planning and budgeting. Why do you call it that the level of precision in case of bottom up method is higher compared to percentage of sales? Because normally when you are talking about percentage of sales method or trend analysis method or projecting income statement, we are heavily relying on the past facts and figures. But in case of bottom up method, we are there not to carry the past figures into consideration. Rather, we are there to see to all these activities to be performed in the business afresh, and we are there to start from scratch. We may drop some of the activities which were earlier executed, we may add some new activities, we can introduce new ways and means of performing the same activities in a different orientation with different methods or different practices, and this leads to a more precise prediction of different cost components at the end of the business. That is why it is always having the advantage of having higher precision compared to other methods. And when we adopt a method which is having a higher level of precision, it leads to proper planning and budgeting at the end of the business. Moving further, the second advantage is a tangle to operational drivers. When we are talking about operational drivers, indirectly we are hinting upon the functionalities of business. We all know that when you are going to talk about a company or a business, we are decomposing the business into different functional domains. Now, each and every functional domain is having some variables or issues which are going to drive the incurrence of cost in those functional domains, which are otherwise more popularly labeled as the drivers or the cost drivers, which facilitates the ascertainment of costs to be incurred in lieu of activities to be performed in those functional domains. So, by adopting bottom-up method as forecasting income statement, as we are starting from the scratch, it is always going to contribute towards that very objective of tangling all the operational drivers, because we all know when you are going to talk about production function, marketing function, administrative function, sales function, distribution function, they are not independent of each other, rather they are very closely intricated and intermingled with each other so far as the business is concerned, and hence we cannot treat the production function absolutely in isolation without paying any heed or attention to other functionalities of business, owing to the simple reason that they are related to each other. So, on the basis of that pragmatic relationship between and among different functional domains, if we are carrying all the cost drivers together related to different functional domains, which ultimately leads to the ascertainment of cost associated with these functional domains, it is going to be better off to use such platform for the projection of income statement. Then the third advantage is it is convenient to adjust with pragmatic business changes. Unlike that of the trend analysis method, percentage of sales method of projecting income statement, we are not finding that flexibility to adjust against any changes emanating from the external forces. But under bottom-up method, we have that flexibility to adjust all our activities in response to any changes emanating from either external environment or internal environment of the business, so as to arrive at a better and robust forecast with regard to different financial items falling under the purview of income statement, while we are talking about projected income statement related to a short span of time in the future. Moving further, though it is having certain advantages, they are also not free from the impediments or the limitations when we are talking about projection of income statement. There are certain limitations which have been jotted down over here. It is time consuming. Obviously, when you are going to start all the activities and think of different activities related to different functional domain from the scratch level, it is going to be time consuming, because it is rather a tedious task to grab all the activities to be executed, then finalize the ways and means of performing those activities, and finally putting all these into action. So, obviously, it is consuming a lot of time which is otherwise an impediment to this particular method. Then the second is need detailed internal data and assumptions. Obviously, so far as a company is concerned, you can only adopt bottom-up method of projecting income statement provided we have access to detailed internal information about the company, without which it is not practically viable to adopt bottom-up method, and at the same time we are there to assume a number of issues related to different functional domains without assumption, as we all know that when you are going to project the income statement, we are there to assume about the market conditions, about the underlying premises, about the situations which are going to have a bearing on the operational activities of the business. So, putting all this together, it always carry a bundle of assumptions and it requires heavy quantum of internal information and data related to the business. Otherwise, it is not practically possible to adopt bottom-up method for forecasting income statement. Then the last limitation is it is sensitive to errors at the input level. Obviously, when you are talking about the data or the information at the lowest level where the activities are finally executed on the soft floor, there are different issues which are having a bearing on the qualitative attributes of the data, which is going to be further used for the purpose of projecting different variables falling within the scope of income statement. So, if the input data has gone wrong or is misleading, we will end up with projection of financial statement which is not going to be that robust and rational so far as financial decision making is concerned, because the raw data has gone wrong, or we may say that we cannot rely heavily on the raw data if at the input level there is some manipulations or fabrications getting executed by the employees who are entrusted with that particular task. After discussing the bottom-up method, let us move further to another method, that is top-down method, which is also extensively used heavily when we are talking about strategic planning, strategic cost management, strategic financing, and so on and so forth. When projecting an income statement under this method, it begins with large micro level variables such as the size of the entire market or anticipated economic growth, and works its way down to a projection unique to a company. The income statement is usually derived by applying assumptions and ratios after estimating total revenue using external factors. It is exactly the opposite protocol to that of the previous method, that is bottom up. In case of bottom up, we started in a reverse order. In case of top down, we are starting with the revenue orientation, that is sales, and we all know when you are going to talk about sales quantum or revenue, it is conditional upon the market size. Specifically, each and every company are there to operate in a particular market, and each and every company are having a share of the total market size, and the quantum of revenue to be generated in lieu of sales are somewhere or the other conditional upon the market share which the particular company is expecting to have down the line in a future span of time. So, we are starting from the most abstract level by considering what is the market size. Then after ascertaining the market size of the whole industry, what is the share of the market particularly to that particular business or company for which we are entrusted with the task of projecting income statement. After ascertaining the market share, we are there to see to the potential of the company to capitalize on that market share and converting the same into revenue by executing sales activities. So, we are there to start from the macro level, that is from the industry level, then we are gradually going downward towards the company level in a customized orientation. So that's why it is called top-down method of projecting income statement. After ascertaining the projected sales, again we are there to go down the line, we are there to ascertain different operating cost in lieu of production activities, in lieu of administrative activities, in lieu of maintenance activities and other functional issues which are related to the business, and we are there to project different financial expenses and different variables which are falling under the purview of income statement, and we are there to project the income statement by using the top down method. Now, moving further, when you are going to make use of the top down method, as I said, it is extensively used at strategic planning level. When we are talking about cost management and strategic planning, we are there to follow certain steps in a proper sequence and by adopting a scientific orientation. To start with, here the first step is start with market size or the industry growth. As I said just now, it starts with market size, and the market size is conditional upon the growth which is expected of that particular industry to which the particular company is belonging to. Now, we are also there to consider the potential growth of that particular industry down the line for the future window period for which we are intending to project the income statement, and considering that industry growth, we are to recalculate the market size of that particular industry, then we are there to go down the line to ascertain the market share and so on and so forth. Then the step 2 is estimate company's market share. That is the second step associated with top down. After ascertaining the market size, ascertain the market share of the company for which we are intending to project the income statement. Then step 3 is revenue forecast. Based on the market share to that particular company, we are there to ascertain the quantum of revenue to be generated in lieu of sales activities. And the last step is estimate all the components of cost based on historical percentages. After ascertaining the sales level to which the particular company is going to expose, we are there to go down the line and accumulate all the components of cost in lieu of different activities that are expected to be performed to comply to that magnitude of sales what we have already estimated. We are there to combine all the activities and the cost related to such activities, and we are there to ascertain the projected income statement. There are certain advantages of this particular method of projecting the income statement like that of the bottom up method. It is faster and less data intensive. Unlike that of the bottom up method, which is more data intensive, as we discussed, that one of the fundamental limitation of the bottom up method is it requires heavy quantum of input level data, without which it is not practically viable to go for the adoption of bottom up method. But in case of top down approach, we do not require that intensive data for the purpose of projecting the income statement, because we are starting from an abstract and macro level and we are going down the line. So, here the requirement of data and its rigor is less compared to bottom up method, and that is why it is one of the advantage. Then the second advantage is it is useful for strategic planning or evaluating new markets. When we are talking about new business entities or the companies who have started their business or penetrating into a new market, this particular method is handy and fruitful to project the income so far as the company is concerned, because we are starting from macro orientation and ending with micro orientation, unlike that of bottom up method where we are starting from micro and ending up with macro level orientation. So, here there is the advantage of the same, that we are starting from macro and ending with micro orientation. Then the third one is, it is easier to apply to new businesses or high level models. As I said, the businesses who are into the protocol of diversification or penetrating into a new market or adding a new product to their existing line of product and would like to see what is going to be the quantum of revenue that is additionally expected to be generated by introducing new product into the existing product lineup. This method is very useful for the companies who are resorting to that particular practice, and that is one of the typical advantage of this particular method of projecting income statement. Then top down forecasting methods limitations. Also, this is not free from the lacunas so far as a method of projecting income statement is concerned. The first deficiency is, it is less accurate for detailed budgeting or operational planning. As I said, why it is less accurate compared to the previous method, that is bottom up method, owing to the simple reason that we are starting from macro orientation, and macro means we are taking into consideration the economy, we are taking into consideration the industry, we are taking into consideration all the market pervasive forces which are going to have a bearing on the particular company and its future states of affairs. And it is practically not that feasible to exactly talk about the movements or fluctuations in market pervasive forces which are going to have a bearing on the potential of the company to generate revenue and to end up in a state of profit. So, it is less accurate owing to the simple reason that the external factors or forces are heavily influencing this particular method and its level of accuracy. Then the second one is, it ignores specific internal drivers like unit cells, headcounts, etc. When we are going for top down method of projecting income statement, we are not paying that much of heed to the internal states of affairs of a business. Rather, we are more biased and dragged towards the external factors which are going to have an influence or bearing on the operating activities of the business. So, at times we may end up in a state where we are absolutely going astray from what is there in the company and what we are talking about in lieu of projecting the level of income through the preparation of income statement. So, there is every possibility owing to the simple reason that we do not pay attention to the internal facts, how many employees are working right now in the company, what was the unit price of sales and so on and so forth, what is the cost per unit of output. We are not carrying that, which are hailing its origin in the past activities. That is why it may so happen that we are ending up with projections or estimations which are highly objectionable. Then the last limitations of this method is, it relies heavily on assumptions and external data quality. Obviously, when we are talking about market pervasive forces or factors, we have no choice but to rely on those agencies or institutions who are providing information related to macroeconomic variables. We cannot generate those macroeconomic variables. We are there to depend on the providers of those information, and it may so happen that such informations provided by the institutions or agencies are in a state of fabrication owing to XYZ reasons. And if we are getting access to information pertaining to market pervasive forces which are not genuine or which are more or less cosmetized, obviously our projection based on those market pervasive forces are going to be critical so far as its true and fair orientation is concerned at the end of the users community, because our very objective of projecting income statement is to read the future states of affairs of a company in terms of generating profit by preparing a projected income statement. And if we fail to do so, obviously we are going to fail in terms of taking different financial decisions in an informed and rational manner. That is why it is one of the fundamental limitation of this particular method. Moving further, the next method is statistical method of projecting income statement. Now, this is more or less a quantitative approach, unlike that of the bottom up or top down method orientation of projecting the income statement. The statistical approach to income statement forecasting projects future financial performance using historical data and quantitative models to find patterns, trends and causal relationship between variables between and among different financial matrices and indicators. It usually uses regression model or time series analysis. So, as we know, statistics only understands the language of numbers. Unlike that of the top down, bottom up, trend analysis and other methods of projecting income statement, when we are going to adopt statistical method for projecting income statement, we are there to consider the historical data and we are there to extrapolate those historical data, we are there to find and create trends, we are there to establish causal relationship between different financial variables which are having a bearing on the income of the business, and by putting all these things, finally we are to fit a model of regression family in order to estimate or predict the values what different financial variables are going to assume down the line in a future span of time. So, it is heavily based on the application of statistics and mathematics in order to go for projection of financial variables falling under the purview of income statement. To start with, there are different steps associated with the statistical method. The first one is accumulation of historical data, because we all know without data we cannot make use of statistical applications. We cannot go for any operation of statistics unless and otherwise we have the data, and that too at a sufficient level. So, as much statistical data as possible is expected to be accumulated to go for the application of statistical method of projecting income statement. Then select model and variables. As I said, after accumulation of statistical data, we are there to establish causal relationships, because by using such causal platform, we are there to predict one variable given the values of other variable in a construct of independent variable and dependent variable set of. So, we may come across a construct where there is one DB and there are n number of IVs. So, we are there to give the input of a multiple of independent variables in order to project or predict a particular dependent variable which is reflecting a financial variable of the income statement. So, in the same manner, we are there to go for certain diagnostics, because for the use and application of regression family of models, the most essential task is to diagnose the characteristics or the attributes of different financial variables which are falling under the purview of income statement. Then develop the forecasting model. You are there to develop that construct or the model by using dependent variable, independent variable, control variable, extraneous variable, based on your diagnostics about the financial variables which are going to be accommodated in the income statement. Then the fourth step is fit the chosen model to historical data. After developing and proposing a hypothetical model, you are there to go for an application of that model using the historical data, and after doing the same, you are there to go for the forecast of different financial variables, because by using the historical data and statistical method, we can ascertain the coefficient values, and finally we can make use of such coefficient values in order to project the values for different financial variables are going to assume in a future span of time, and using such projected values of financial variables, we are there to predict the income statement. There are certain typical advantages of this particular method, as we know that whenever we are going for the use and application of statistics as a method of projection, it is the most scientific approach to do so, showing simply because of the reason that statistics duly accommodate the likelihood or the probability world within which the future states of affairs are lying. So, unlike other methods which do not consider the probability orientation, here in statistical method we are paying due attention to that probability orientation, and that is why it is the most scientific approach of projecting anything related to the financial states of affairs of a business. Then it is objective owing to the simple reason, just as I said, it is based on facts, it is going to discuss and deliberate with numbers. So, it is one of the objective approach free from any element of subjectivity in the form of prejudice, in the form of hunches, in the form of biases, in the form of premeditated orientations. Then it is purely data centric, because it starts with numerical data and ends with numerical projections. So, it is heavily data centric. Then it accommodates complex relationships. In other methods, when we are exposed to complicated setups of a business, it is very difficult to predict different financial variables of income statement using other methods. But the capacity and capability of statistical models are high and heavy so far as projection is concerned. That is why it can handle and accommodate any element of complexity between and among different financial variables, and can lead to robust projections based on the financial information. Then there are certain limitations of this method. It requires statistical knowledge and tools. Obviously, one can only go for statistical method provided the person or the user is heavily exposed to and knowledgeable with regard to the application of statistics and playing with the numerical data, without which it is not possible. For layman users, this particular method is an absolute misfit owing to the simple reason that they fail to understand the nuances of statistical method and they fail to interpret the outcomes of statistical method. Then the last one is the vulnerable to data quality and outliers. When we are talking about numerical data, we may come across some outliers. Outliers simply a technical jargon used in the world of statistics, which represent a value of a financial variable which is uneven, which is an exception. So, whenever we are using and adopting the statistical method, we are there to be very careful with regard to outliers, but we have no choice when we are encountering such outliers as a part and parcel of data, and if there prevails outliers that can distort the projection of different financial variables to a significant extent. That is why it is one of the critical limitations when we are talking about the use of statistical method as a protocol of projecting the income statement. And the last one is ignores qualitative factors. As I said, statistics does not understand the language of qualitative attributes. So, it only accommodate and consider the quantitative orientation, and due to this reason there are many qualitative issues which have a bearing while we are talking about projection of income statement, but it cannot be accommodated under this particular method, which is one of the inherent limitation of this method. I hope with these discussions about different methods of projecting income statement, the knowledge and exposure to the projection of income statement is going to be robust, and I hope that the application of these methods through problem solving, through case studies will further add to the level of understanding and exposure to the task of forecasting income statement. Thank you for your patient hearing.